Hi all, João Crepinha here. In our last video, we delved into the world of decoding research integrity and how to evaluate scientific papers. We discussed the immense influx of research papers in today's digital age and the critical need to differentiate credible research from the rest. We explored the tools needed to interpret and assess the integrity of this scientific work. We also touched upon the traditional hierarchy of evidence and RCTs and their role in shaping the bedrock of evidence-based medicine. In today's video, I want to talk about the different types of studies that researchers use to answer important questions about health, disease, and its related outcomes. Let's start first with cohort studies. So cohort studies are a powerful tool for understanding the long-term effects of certain exposures on health outcomes. In these studies, researchers select two or more groups of people based on their exposure to a particular agent, like a vaccine or a medicine, and then follow them over time to see how many in each group develop a particular disease or outcome. This type of study is particularly useful for understanding diseases that take a long time to develop. Case in point, cardiovascular diseases. For example, the Framingham Heart Study is a long-term, ongoing cardiovascular cohort study of residents of the city of Framingham in Massachusetts, United States. The study began in 1948 with 5,209 adult subjects from Framingham and is now on its third generation of participants. The Framingham Heart Study has also led to the identification of major cardiovascular risk factors such as high blood pressure, high blood cholesterol, smoking, obesity, diabetes, physical inactivity as well. It has also contributed to a better understanding of how these risk factors contribute to the development of cardiovascular diseases. The next type of study that I want to talk about is case control studies, and they are another important type of study. In these studies, researchers identify patients with a particular disease or condition and match them with controls who don't have the disease. They then collect data on past exposure to a possible causal agent for the condition or the disease. This type of study is particularly useful for studying rare conditions. However, it's important to note that case control studies can't prove causality. Just because two things are associated with each other doesn't mean that one caused the other. The other study are cross-sectional surveys, and they are a type of observational study that analyzes data from a population or a representative subset at a specific point in time. These studies are often used to assess the prevalence of acute or chronic conditions, or to examine the relationship between variables of interest. They can be descriptive, where the aim is to report the current state of affairs, or analytical, where the aim is to investigate the relationship between variables. However, because they capture data at a single point of time, they are not well suited at all for understanding the sequence of events or longitudinal evolution of conditions and health outcomes, or establishing causality. Clinical questions that can be answered by a cross-sectional survey include the following. What is the prevalence of hypertension among adults aged 40 to 60 years in a specific community? Is there an association between physical activity levels and the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, for example, among middle-aged adults? These type of questions can provide valuable insights into the current state of a population's health and can help identify potential risk factors for the disease. However, it's important to remember that cross-sectional studies can only provide a snapshot of a population at a particular time, and they are not good for establishing cause and effect relationships. Finally, I want to talk about case reports. These are detailed descriptions of a medical history in a single patient. Case reports can be a valuable source of information, especially when it comes to rare diseases or adverse reactions to treatment. They can be written up and published quickly, making them a very useful tool for alerting the medical community to potential problems. Now, let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of different types of studies. On this slide, you see listed the advantages and disadvantages of cohort studies. An advantage is that it can establish the sequence of events, which can help infer causality. Disadvantage is that it's expensive and very time-consuming. Advantages and disadvantages of case control studies. For example, an advantage is efficiency for studying rare outcomes. A disadvantage is it cannot establish a sequence of events, so it's hard to infer causality. Cross-sectional surveys, advantages and disadvantages. An advantage is quick and inexpensive to execute and implement, and this is why we see so many of them. Disadvantages, it cannot establish a sequence of events, so it's hard, again, to infer causality. And then finally, the advantages and disadvantages of case reports. An advantage is it can provide detailed information about rare diseases or adverse reactions. And a disadvantage, similar to the others, is that it cannot establish causality. In conclusion, each type of study has its own strengths and weaknesses, and the best type of study depends on the specific question being asked. When you're reading a medical study, it's important to consider the type of study and also the quality of the evidence it provides. Thank you for listening, and until our next video, stay curious and remain critical. Take care.